This is how to assemble a Codex Quest assembly kit video. This is going to be pretty rough, but I'm just going to try and show you generally what you're going to expect to find in a box when it arrives and how to deal with most problems as they occur. But for the most part, it's not going to be too difficult. I've tried to get this as simple as the process as possible. Generally, the main tools you're going to want is a simple hammer, preferably rubber so it doesn't dent the wood. Another good tool to use is a flathead screwdriver. This allows, in the event of making a mistake, to pry apart layers. As you can see, it's a lot of layers that are going to be built, stacked on top of each other to make this book work. Another tool too, sometimes the laser won't fully cut because there's a knot in the wood or something like that. So you usually want an X-Acto blade or something just to cut the woods, because as you can see right now in this template, there is a line where we need to cut it out. So I would just take a nice little slice, try to cut it as best I can. And if you do cut into the wood, it's not a big deal. Usually this is on the back side of the wood that I'm also doing this on, or a sanded side, so. Sometimes just doing a nice light score and then going back multiple times will also help you get through the cut pretty easily. Using a little force is also necessary. Another handy tool in the event that you don't want to do the knife, you can also use a chisel or a flathead screwdriver and also kind of do the same thing. And worry not, if you do break something, it's not hard for us to send you something to fix it or replace it. Just generally try to build as much of the project as you can before you request for parts to be sent back. That way we can try and minimize shipments as much as possible. And we can also make sure to send extras just in case that more things break. So as you can see here now, I've cut and done some things there. So, all right, we're gonna begin with first page. This will be a document available on our website. It will be basically one of each page showing you all the various parts you'll need per page in order to put them together. So page 1 is toggles of truth. And we're going to start looking through all of the pieces here. So the first two we're going to need these guys. We're just going to set them off to the side for now. Everything else we're going to just put it down, get it out of our way, come back to it when we're ready for it. Up now. There will also be 2 bags in your box. Should be dowels and magnets in there as well. There are different sizes. We try to mark on them. Sometimes it might not be marked on there, but we try to mark them based on their size: E3s, E2s, Q2s, that sort of thing. E refers to the thinner dowels, whereas Q refers to the thicker dowels. Try to avoid putting your magnets near any metal. They are very powerful, especially this very large one, which we're going to do something with right away. All the brown pieces should be inside the stack, right? Like the little loose brown pieces and stuff. Like the ring for the magnet tool. Like, you know what I'm talking about? The circle with the double.
Yeah, those
that's all
loose.
stacked inside here.
Those are the loose. The loose ones are
Inside
right up on
here.
the top.
Yeah.
But the other ones, like for this,
yeah,
they're taped within the page.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yep. All right. So these are your main 3 layers. Now notice that even though there are some pieces in here, some of them belong to page 1, some of them belong to page 2. So we definitely do need to start taking these apart. And there is usually tape holding on the back side or the front side. So the first thing I like to do is find the one that has 3 large circles and another large circle, more vertical cut like that. We'll take the tape off. Now, if you peel up a little bit of the tape and suddenly see that some of your wood is peeling, the best thing you can do is take a hair dryer or a hot air gun or something like that and blow it on the tape, and that will help prevent it from peeling up the wood grain. But it generally shouldn't be an issue now that we're using this tape, but we had some kits that there was a tan tape instead of a blue tape that went on there. So just as a forewarning. If you see blue tape, you should be okay. So this is actually one of the layers of page 1. So we're just going to try and look for layers or pieces that generally match a shape. So it's right here actually around these little toggle pieces and that yellow piece highlighted structure. But it is the frame piece right there. So just as a point of reference, there's also usually a little single symbol number in the bottom left or bottom right corner of these bigger frame pieces. So this one says 1 on it. So generally you're going to have 3 to 5 layers per page. So if you have only 2, then you're missing 1 layer, but generally it's going to be somewhere in that stack. Set it off to the side so I can still make room for everything else that I need to take apart. You're definitely going to want some space to do this. A big table is usually handy, or having multiple tables nearby, as well as garbage to throw away scrap wood. A general rule of thumb to know what to throw away and what not to throw away is if it doesn't have any engravings on it, or it looks like it had a bunch of stuff cut out of it, generally like a frame piece like this, this is something you would generally just throw away. Little things like this, don't need it. Whereas you do need, these pieces that have little toggle iconography on them. This is a page 1 piece. This is a page 5 piece. We're gonna keep these off to the side, use them later. This we're gonna keep at the ready when we used our big magnet here, which I'll show you in a bit. These are page 1 toggles. This is something we won't do until a later stage of the process. So initially we start off with what I call stage 1, where we build the main frames of all the pages. And then that's usually using pieces like this. And then later on we'll come back and we'll use pieces more like these, which is where you would customize your puzzle and lock it up with solutions in order to actually make it work the way that you want the puzzle to solve, rather than just the one initial de facto way that I created. These are also pieces that are for a later page. They're page 4, so they have a bunch of little X circles. You only really need 8 of these, so if you are missing 1 or 2, that's no big deal. We cut extras generally with each book. These are a page 1 piece. These go with those things that we set off to the side a little earlier. Just keep all that there. I'm gonna double check here. There are these toggles, but for now I don't need any of this, so I'm just gonna keep my workspace easy and not messy. I'm just not gonna take this apart just yet. Set it off to the side. These are again page 1 pieces in here, but I don't need them until I'm locking the whole thing up. So again, I'm just gonna set it off to the side and hold off. This is a page 5 layer with a bunch of page 3 pieces. Set it off to the side. Same thing with this one. These are hinge spines, so I am going to pop out at least one of them for now. I'll keep the rest in here because this goes for page 5. Alright, so now, after removing the color layers and the top 2 layers, you generally should enter a point where you see a bunch of random little pieces kind of stacked in there. This is how we try to keep our shipment easy and simple and all compact without having a bunch of bags and everything else. But you need to unload at least one of these brown rings so that we can use that with our main 1-inch magnet. Set that off to the side. There is a spare in case you damage it or break it in some way, so we'll put that off to the side. There should be about 3 of these. You only need 2, so I'm just going to keep 2 on. I'm going to put the other one off to the side. Looks like this. There should be what I am dubbing page hooks. These are long, simple looking, well, not simple looking, they're actually kind of wacky looking, but they have numbers on their bottoms that correspond to the page that they belong to. So these are page 4 hooks. These are page 1 hooks, which we're going to keep because that's what we're working on. They look like this. Page 3 hooks. set those off to the side. And page 2 hooks, which are the longest ones. Okay. These little guys are for page 5, so we'll set those off to the side. Page 5 layer, page 5 layer. Basically, all page 5 layer rule of thumb has these 3 different chambers. So you can easily set it off to the side right away once you recognize that. These are page 3 pieces. They're just 2 extra spares. So we'll set those off. There should be 3 pieces like this, which belong to the page 5. Set them off to the side. These pieces belong to page 3. Set them off to the side. Page 1 toggles, some extra ones as well. Don't need them right away. Page 3 pieces as well. Now there's 2 sets of these just in case one of them doesn't look good or you're missing a piece, but we have 2 sets of little 4 character icon circles. They look like game pieces you would find in a board game. Those are for page 4. Now, we try to usually organize the layers in order of the page, which there is, again, there will be some kind of marking on them indicating which page they belong to. So these are page 4 right here on top. I can just pick those up and try and set them off to the side. Okay, and then page 3. Not a big deal if it doesn't get, stay perfectly stacked. Just set it off to the side. Get it out of your way for now. Now this piece right here and this piece, I'm gonna put these off to the side off to a different side. I'm gonna do something with them a little bit here in regards to sanding so that they function properly. But then I'm gonna set off the other pieces for page 2 in their own pile as well. But this is what the page 2 pieces look like that I'm setting off to the side. These are page 2 layers. This is 1 layer. It's just split in half. Okay, this is a page 1 layer right here, and it's got a bunch of pieces in it, so we're going to take tape off. Don't press too hard on this space, at least for now. It won't be an issue once it's got other layers under it to prevent it from going too far, but you can press on this too hard and break it, so be careful with this middle section here. But we do need this piece, page 1, so we're going to set it there to the side. These are some more brown layers. These can be thrown away. This is the outer excess frame template cut, whatever you want to call it. Another frame cut, throw it out. We need these for page 2. Set those to the side. And these all belong to page 3. Looks like this. Looks like this. How long will you be gone?
10 minutes. Depends on traffic.
No worries. this is another layer right here for page 1, as well as this. So we'll set those off to the side. They are probably the least needed, so put them on the bottom of your stack if you are creating a stack like I am. This is another layer for page 1, as you can see in the bottom corner, and on here. Sometimes I try to mark it so that the halves at least have some kind of marking on both halves too, so you know. Set that off to the side for now. This is another piece that we are actually going to set into that sanding pile that I already set those two page 2 pieces in, the ones that look like this. So I'm going to set that with those pieces, and I'll show those off in a bit what we're going to do with those. Now I've reached the point in my pile where I've got just the text panels and their outer layers. So they look like this. They should be in order, but if they are not, I will tell you now the layer order that they should be in. Naturally, it was the 2 elves is the first starter sentence for the first page. Second page is after the riddle is read aloud. Third page is Lady Silvara's levitating coin. Fourth page is under Sir Roland's direction. And then the last page isn't actually separated out like the rest is, and this is for page 5, and it says none of them knew why they had been visited. So those are the orders of the panels. They are also shown on these template papers what the story text panel should start with before you even put it on there. Now another thing to note on this book, or on this this page specifically for page 1, the layer for its outer frame, which is what these are what go around the story text panels like this. Page 1 has a bigger frame than the other pages. And I can show you here if you can see that. There is just a slight difference in the height and the width of the frame pieces. So page 1 is the larger frame. The other 3 belong to the inner pages of 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to set those frames off in their respective piles. Keep the page 1 frame as well as the story text. Put the other story text panels off to the side. Now I've reached, there's also these tabs that were with those panels. Generally, there should be 4 of these and 1 of these. 4 of these, 1 of these. This belongs to page 5, and these belong to the other pages. We only need 1 for page 1. The rest can be set off to the side. Okay, and now I've reached the front frames portion of the stack. This is the page 1 frame. We're going to keep that one. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Again, be very careful with this layer. This one has these gates. They're okay until, you know, they're a little flimsy, but once we get the book put together, they should be a lot more sturdy and less prone to breakage. So just be careful with these when you're placing them down. Be wary that they like to drop when you're setting them down like that. So, and the same thing applies for page 5. It's got doors that do the same thing, so be wary of them. But these ones are a little bit more sturdy than the page 4 gates, so don't have to worry as much with that one. Alright, so that should be all the pieces we need initially, and we're going to start off with the main thing that runs this entire book in terms of how to function with most of the magnets and puzzles themselves. And that is your largest magnet in your grouping. Be very careful, these things will pinch your hands. Like that. That was very close, it almost got me. Try and get it out of the bag first before you start tearing it apart. Might be safer. So, I have a metal table, so it's a little easier. Be very careful when setting these down, because that loud bang can crack a magnet and you're not going to be able to use it. So be very careful. Ideally have maybe some cloth or something between a surface like this and that will help reduce the impact and not damage your magnets as much. I also would suggest that you keep them closer towards the edge of any surface so that you can peel them off and grab them as you need. So it is nice to have them magnetized close by. Another thing that you can do is have a magnet table and have a layer of wood, just a single layer of wood. Still easily interact with them, pull them up if you need to. So that's a good way to do that. Grab that brown circle ring and the red circle here. We're going to take some glue. We're going to apply it on the inside of this little engraved etched line on this brown circle. It's hard to see in the camera, I'm sure, but you'll see it with your eye. Keep the glue on the inside of it. You don't need a ton, just a nice little layer around the inside, like so. And then you're just going to try and align the edge of the red circle with that line that's in the brown circle. That way it'll be as dead center as possible in terms of being glued on there. Now, I generally actually put the magnet into the brown ring first, but it doesn't really matter because you can still, while it's still drying, we can still put this in here. And the orientation of the magnet does not matter right now, but this orientation that we're putting it in will determine the orientation of many of the other magnets in the book. So whatever way is north or south on this magnet for you, either make a mental note, maybe take a permanent marker or something, and mark on it if you really need to. It might help. Well, I guess marking on it isn't going to help. But what I like to do is I usually will have my stack of magnets sitting next to me somewhere on the table, and I will test it with the little 1/4-inch magnets, the tiniest ones, in a giant stack. Now I know that this is the attraction side, and I know this is the detracted side. So if this magnet group was attracting from this end, and it attracts here, that means this end is also going to attract. Yep. Now this is a lot stronger, so be careful for the pinching. But once your magnets are attracted, you know that this end is your positive, this end is your negative. Because negative to negative will not work, but positive to negative will attract. Try to remember your repel and your attractant angles or your orientations of your magnets. Right? Again, it will catch you, so be very wary of that. Now you can see that my circle tried to move a little bit, so I have to move it back with my fingers while it's still drying. I'm also going to take a Q-tip, which is pretty handy. Get that glue out of the little crevices that your hands cannot quite reach. Generally, I just use basic wood glue, Type Bond 2, I think is what I use, but just make sure that it's a good, strong bonding wood glue specifically when doing all this stuff. So there, now we should have our magnet key piece. This is the main thing that you're going to use for figuring out how all of your magnets are going in the rest of your book. So we're going to set that off to the side for a bit. We're going to grab our brown layer, set that down. We're then going to grab our 1/4-inch small magnets. Remember that our positive orientation or attraction point is this way. So if I'm going to place this piece down on the brown layer like this, I want my magnets to attract. I want them facing upward, facing towards me. That means I also want the brown layer facing towards me in this orientation. There should have been a number on here, but if there isn't, I will add it in there. So please be aware that you want these two square lines on this right side facing you and the good side facing up. You can tell a good side from a bad side of a piece of wood generally is there will be scorch marking and a sharper edge on the back side, or the bad side as I call it, whereas the front side is going to be, oh, there's the number. It's actually right there. Number should be over here. So whatever orientation the number is, that's your left side that you're looking at, and your right side's the opposite. So right now I'm going to have my left side with the number facing towards me. I'm going to take my magnets, have their attraction side pointing up, and I'm going to hammer them into the two hexagon holes. Hexagon holes are generally meant to help hold magnets. Sometimes they'll hold pegs, but generally I'm using them for magnet holding purposes, whereas the circle holes are usually just for pegs. So I put two Q2 magnets in there. Now I'm going to take my key, I'm going to make sure I test it. It should magnetize. I shouldn't drop it now. Okay, from there, we're going to take this layer, just put it on top, align it over the holes that you see there. Make sure that your gaps are enclosed as they should look. And then just make sure all your holes can be seen through on the other side of the table. Just going to flip this over. That white layer on the bottom side. Try not to move it too much. If you have to realign it with the holes again on the table. Then you're going to take this layer, you're going to flip it, put it here, and put it here. Oh, wait, nope, I did that wrong. I was like, hold on, I caught myself here. Okay, so you're actually going to take your color layer and you're going to put that over here first. There we go. Now this is a part where these pieces I was telling you earlier that we had set aside for sanding, we need to have these pre-sanded before we go any further into the book. So I'm going to show that quick and that part of the process, so I'll be back. Alright, so this part of the process is best done before you even start the whole process for the rest of the book. So these are all the pieces we're going to have to end up sanding to make sure that the book just operates generally better and overall, but it also kind of helps catch any pain points that may arise just from, you know, something not cutting properly or, you know, some bug or whatever. These are things that I've just found have helped make my assembly process a lot easier. So we're going to sand these portions of these pieces to do easier operation with. So the first one is a page 1. It's all of these edges. Sanded, either using sandpaper by hand, which you can definitely do. Let's see if I can't get it real quick. It's not a great sandpaper, but the idea is you would hit the edges just at an angle. I need a better sandpaper. One sec, guys. There we go. That'll work. A rougher grit definitely doesn't hurt. Makes it a lot easier process. We were just trying to round that edge off just a little bit so that it's just not so sharp anymore. That way it doesn't catch on anything. Kind of just roll it in your hand as you kind of go back and forth with your sandpaper. Should round the edge off pretty quickly. Especially if you have a higher grit. This is an 80 grit that I'm using. It's going to get dusty doing this a little bit. So definitely try to have a ventilation mask or do this in a place that's well ventilated that you can at least get the sawdust cleaned up. Preferably out in your garage or workshop if you got one. And if you have a belt sander, what I typically do is I'll just take the belt sander and just hit all the edges real quick. It's a lot faster, but obviously most people don't have a belt sander, so in the event you have to go get some sandpaper, this is the way to do it. And do not worry if you've already assembled your book and haven't done any of these parts of the process. This isn't something you can't go back and edit or fix or redo if you need to, because I can show you very easily how to open up a page and pull a piece out and do this too. But if your book is working as is and you don't notice any catching points or it's not having issues, you don't probably need to do the sanding. It's just a precautionary method of doing this now that maybe in the future, if you have a problem with something sticking, this might be the culprit. Sometimes it might help if you just use a surface to hold it down too. You do a lot faster. It's kind of like a belt sander effect by hand. I don't know if you can see that on the camera as well, but basically all these little edges should just be nice and sanded. Okay, next two pieces are page 2 pieces. It's these guys. We're going to sand the inside edges here, just along the outside, not the little windows, just the outer edge. Now be forewarned, running your finger along this wood will have a chance of slivers. So I do this because I have callous hands. If you have softer hands or don't typically work with wood and don't know how to work, without getting slivers easily, make sure to have some kind of leather gloves or work gloves when you're handling the wood like this. So anyway, so that's been sanded, soft edge, soft edge. Set that off. We'll do the other side. Other piece. Next is up these guys. So generally I have a belt sander or drum sander that I will actually send these pieces through as well as these pieces through. Sometimes we run low on time or we're not having enough time to sand these, so there will be unassembled kits where these have not been sanded. Unfortunately, the best way to do that is either using a drum sander as I have or having orbital sander. Where's the orbital? Disc sander.
Out there.
Can you bring me one, please? Having a disc sander to sand these back sides just a little bit so that they're not as rough initially as they might feel. But it is possible by hand too. So you are going to remove color, but that's also a good indicator that you've sanded enough of the material away for this piece to move a little bit easier and where it's located in terms of the puzzle page. So like here, it can see I have quite a bit of white, but there's still some red. So I'm going to put more pressure on the sandpaper and that piece on the red side of it, so I can hopefully get that red grain off a little bit more. That way I know the whole piece is a lot more level, a lot more sanded evenly. So that's not terrible, and I'm going to use that just as is. It's fine. It doesn't need to be fully sanded. You don't generally see this piece except for when it's sticking out from the bottom side, and even then you're never really looking at the bottom side of your book. But I am going to round the front edge and the bottom edge of it, which I'll show you here in a second. So we'll do that, and these are page 5 pieces, which I forgot to mention, by the way. So sanding off their bottom edges and the top edge of the main front flat portion of it, the bolt end, if you will. That's what these three are, is bolts, to a degree. And then I'm going to sand the back side or flat side of it. So that's another good one. One more to go. The flat side now. Can you bring the vacuum in here?
I got something better. Charged.
Did you get the other one working?
Oh, yeah. No, I bought one for myself a while back.
Thought we had one already.
We did. It's Matt's, but I haven't charged it. This one's mine. But it dies really quick. So you gotta use it fast.
And there's the third one. I also like to sand the edges of these brown ones along this edge here on the opposite side of the circles on both sides. Whoops. There and there. I'll show you afterwards here in a second.
I just stopped working at 1:30. I called it, so you don't have me getting paid for sitting.
Dork.
They've heard me talk
I'll have to
already.
mute that now.
They've heard me talk already.
Yeah, but what you just said.
I'm just gonna call it now because you're doing this.
Restart. So we're gonna sand these pieces again along the long edge on the opposite side of the circles here, here and here. And this is how they're gonna generally look after you've done it, but on both sides. Like this, both sides. I'll do the rest here in a second, but let me just set those off to the side for now. This piece, we're gonna just sand the top edges on both sides. You don't have to do a lot, it usually sands away pretty quick. You just want a nice, soft, round bevel. This one's a little trickier. I do it with the belt sander typically, but you should still be able to take your sandpaper and hit these edges. You just gotta kind of press the tines out a little bit. Now you gotta be careful not to break them, but it does help with the operation of this puzzle in the long term, I believe. You don't have to do a lot again. Just a nice little light sanding. Especially with a harder grip. Makes it a lot easier and faster. Hard to see that angle, I'm sure, but it is pretty beveled. And then these, you just sand the whole backside, the whole flat face, until it feels pretty smooth, ideally. But we also do it with our drum sander, so I'm gonna go do that real quick with the rest of the pieces, and I'll be right back. Alright, I forgot to mention that as well as sanding here along these inner spines here, you also have to sand this outer edge. The outer edge up here, as well as in here. Not sure if you can see it now, but I've already sanded it. You also have to sand the inner edge here on the layer 2 panel. It looks like this. Gotta sand it down here and up here. The best way to do that is just take sandpaper and hit that inner edge. There, that should be nice and soft edge there. Okay, that should conclude all the sanding. As you can see, I sanded the back side of these so that it's white, and usually will move a lot smoother that way. Gonna set those off to the side for page 2. We don't need them for now. Okay, now we can go back to page 1 assembly. So we should have, so where we left off was we had our white layer, our brown layer with the 2 Q2 magnets, or the 2/4 inch magnets in the front that are magnetized towards the key. Like that looks like this with the big magnet. So this layer should be there, and then we're gonna be on the back side with a red layer on either side as well. We're gonna line up our peg holes as best as we can on all the corners. It definitely helps to have an overhead light or something kind of just above where you're working, so you can look down in and you kind of see through the different layers and align them by their holes that way. And then you'll take this piece here, place it on top. You should be able to see the magnets should be hidden by this piece, and you should be able to see the 2 holes aligned with their corresponding Q2s. We're going to grab the Q2s here. This is what a Q2 looks like. It's one of the thicker but super short pegs. Now this is the tricky part. Because they're so hard to hold, you might want needle nose pliers to kind of help hold the peg for yourself so you don't smash your fingers. Otherwise you might do that a little too often. There's a number of small pegs throughout this process. Once you get a peg started though, you can usually let go and hammer it through the rest of the way. You really want to make sure though that your piece is aligned with the hole below so you don't damage your page in any way. There is kind of a way to hold them too with your fingernails and the edge of your finger. Just enough that you just gotta tap it a little bit and then you can kind of send it all through. Now you should be able to see your layer like this. When you press on it, it should bounce out like a spring. Now you have these brown layer pieces. I typically use a product known as Slip It, which is just a silicone-based lubricant that's meant for woodworking projects. But you can also use beeswax or candle wax if you're really desperate. You don't have to do it, but sanding also would do the same trick. I generally put this on here so that these pieces will work long-term, a little bit easier sliding and gliding across everything without having to do a ton of sanding this way. But if you do sanding, it will generally get the same effect of what we're trying to achieve here. You're gonna take your piece and you're gonna kind of push this white layer up. You kind of gotta thread this brown layer in so that that main notch gets at least encapsulated, and this piece should then sit flat so that you see kind of a single layer. See how it rests in there like that? It should just sit like that. You're going to do that with the other piece on the opposite side. Applying my slip it on both sides of it. Bottoms as well. Now you should have your two brown pieces facing towards the square rectangle side, like that. Set that back down temporarily. We're gonna then grab the next layer pieces, which is this and this. This goes on the side with the two squares or rectangles in it. And this goes on the opposite side, like so. Now, before we do anything further, we got to get our page hooks in there as well. And I'm going to apply slip it on their sides as well. If you do sand these, I would only sand up to the hook point right here, maybe a little further back. You don't need to sand the whole thing, just those portions of it. Maybe the top edge and the bottom edge, you know, like along these burnt edges, just to give it a little bit smoother of a glide. Or like I do, just I take beeswax or slip it and apply it to those edges, and it should achieve the same results. You're gonna have to lift the brown piece up a little bit, kind of slide the red one into the notch with it. I'll show you that in both cameras here. But you also have to make sure your layers underneath are actually aligned, otherwise it won't drop all the way through. So sometimes it just helps to just keep this one underneath but not perfectly under there, and then you can lift the whole brown layer up and get this piece in. But now, do you see how it's notched inside there? You just gotta lift this brown piece up, slide that in sideways, and it should plop in. Just gotta lift that brown piece up, like so. Slide that in sideways, and it should drop in. If I more slip it. Try not doing this like I'm doing it, holding hand. See how I want to get that piece in there too? I want to kind of start that off, but I'm going to pull this brown piece back a bit, just so it just hits that red notch. And then I can push these pieces around, and it should just sit right into its nice little snug slot. Okay, I'm going to get these back on the table. And mainly you just want to try and focus on one corner of the holes to align all the layers with. I like to use a very thin tool known as a punch, and I'll stick it, and it'll actually allow me to kind of align the hole in a cheater way. But unless you have something that's like a dowel, a thin long dowel that you can do that with, your next best bet is to just try and eyeball straight down with at least one peg hole. You're going to grab an E6, or 5 E6s actually. And these are the longest of the thin ones. And the best way to tell which ones are longest, which ones are shortest, is just hold them up by comparison. You'll see that they're usually a head taller or a head shorter in terms of length. E6s are the longest dowels you'll use, and they're only used on page 1 and page 5 for a rule of reference. So I'm going to hammer. Oh, wait, actually, before I do the next step, hold on. I'm going to grab my brown layer too. That goes on the back side as well. Can't forget that guy. And that just sits right over the top of all the pieces we've inserted so far. So you should see something like this in the corners of page 1. Okay. I'm going to realign my hole, make sure I got all of the layers going through it. Sometimes having the edge of a table can really help. Take an E6 on my lined hole. I can see that my layer 1 has moved out from underneath of my book, so now I have to readjust. I'm going to try and hammer the rest through. Oh, I can't do that. So I have to do this. This is where it gets a little tricky, but this is where you got to definitely use the holes for eyeballing it to get it down in there. Sometimes just getting little taps will also help align the layer or get the peg to point through a little bit, and then usually you can align it right on top of the hole and hammer it in. So that first one's in. It should help make the rest of them a lot easier. Now you have a pivot point for the rest of the pegs to go on. So another easy way is just flip it over, look through using the light and the table underneath. You should be able to see if you got it aligned or not. And then just send it through. Now, we've done the 2 hinge side of the page. But before we do these 3 sides over here, we're going to want to push the center here down, shift this piece back, and this piece back, then shift that out and that out. Doing so prevents us from hammering the hooks accidentally when we're putting these pegs in. See how they're pushed out further? Whereas if before they would have been like this, it's really close and it can be risky to hammer that, so I like to push them outward before I hammer in my E6s here. So 2 more E6s for the 3rd one in the middle. You could do the 3rd one first if you'd rather do that. And there we go. So now that is all those layers. Now these 2 extra holes up here, I actually sometimes will include this thin long dowel. You can get it yourself anywhere. It's just a 1/4 inch. It's not a 1/4 inch. It's an 1/8 inch thick dowel, which is available at most hardware stores anywhere. You don't need it. It's not actually necessary, but it was just an old holdover thing that I still like to do. I just take my scissors or snippers and just break it off right at the flushness of the layer, the flush horizontal plane, I don't even want to call it. But that just kind of helps ensure that those little flaps are a little more sturdy and this page hook doesn't push anything out. As you can see, I'm trying to do right now. You can kind of see it wants to, but those little peg holes do help, but they're not necessary. If you don't have the peg, like thinner peg in your bag, you can also just put some glue down in the hole, and that generally will work too. But if you do that, you also have to be wary of not gluing your page hooks in place. So if you really want to put them in, just go get a 1/8 inch thick dowel, and it should go right in those holes. You just take a scissors, snip it right at the plane level, should be good to go. Okay, grab that largest frame layer of page 1, and that's going to go over the top right here. Just going to hammer it on. Now that whole page 1 should be enclosed entirely within its frame, if you will. The last step of this first stage of the process is to grab your naturally, it was the 2 L's sentence panel, story panel, the brown layer or skeletal frame layer, I guess is what you would call it, with the letter 1 in the dead center. You want that facing towards you. You want the naturally to be flipped facing opposite of you. And then you're going to put little E2s in the corner holes of this. The E2s are the shortest of the thin ones. So they're not Q2s, they're E2s. They're a little bit tinier. These ones are even harder to hold, so you're definitely going to want pliers or something like that helping you to hold these. Although I can do it with practice, it takes time. And I got pretty fat, meaty sausage fingers, so there is a way to do it. It's hard to explain how to do it. Other than you just kind of pinch it with your skin of your fingertips and then hit the very edge of the dowel. And this edge, here, 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 there, there, and there. I like to sand the edges of these because it makes it a little easier to insert these in and out. So I'll just take my sandpaper. There you go. Sand all the edges, just so it makes it a little easier to put it into the page. Blow out any sawdust. You don't have any sawdust. Make sure you're putting it in the correct way with page hooks. If the page is facing away from you, face down, page hook should be on your left. The spine edge should be on your right. The text should read top to bottom. And there you go. Now that is there. We also need to do this step of the hinge step, just because it's easier to do it now versus later. Find your positive attraction with your 1/4 inch magnets. Have them face towards you. I like to start off by putting it into this piece first. Doesn't matter which way it's orientated, just hammer the magnet so that the traction side is facing up towards you. Now stick it into the spine edge, like so. Take your magnet and make sure that it's still attracted to the one that's down in there. Give a light tap. Should start a magnet in the 1/4 inch, in the hexagon hole that's right here. Just tap it flat so that way you know it's perfectly flush, and you can still insert this piece underneath of it. Then you're going to take this guy, put him flat, have the good side that's not burnt or rough or sharp edged facing up towards you. Have the attraction side still facing towards you. Hammer it in, hammer it flat. Make sure it tracks with the good side facing up towards you, like that. Take it out one more time. We're going to flip it over so the bad side is facing towards us. Grab 2 E6s. And we're going to hammer those into the holes on either side of the magnet. And to further ensure that this piece doesn't get stuck inside where it holds the whole page together, I like to take my pliers and I'll crimp the ends of the dowel just a little bit so that it holds still inside there, but it also doesn't grip it too tight that I can't pull it back out without having to pry it out with the screwdriver. Another thing I like to do is also put a little beeswax or slip it on it so that it also just kind of has a little bit more of a smoother operation. Then you just put it in. Work it back and forth a little bit before you really let it sink in first. And there, voila. Now your whole page is generally fully assembled. We can do the color pieces on the front here real quick. We just shove these forward first. Make sure your page hooks are all the way in. You might have to kind of twist and wiggle them a little bit just for this to actually catch and fully go in. These bolts sometimes, if you don't wiggle the page hook, turn it sideways, these won't slide all the way and you'll see like a small gap there. You want them to perfectly flush right up against the edge. And have your page hooks hanging off the edge of your table so you're not smashing them in the process. So make sure the page hooks are either off the table or you have something like these underneath of your page, lifting it up off the table a little bit so that your page hooks aren't getting hammered on when you're doing the assembly process. I like to just do the edge of the table. It's easier. I know that they're pushed up against the edge. I'm gonna grab these 2 pieces. I'm gonna make sure I have my hinge edge on my left, my page hooks on the right side, and then it's facing me like this roughly, or I'm gonna orientate it so I know which way it's facing. I'm gonna have my text stuff on these 2 red things read so that they look like so, with 4 on the left side, 5 on the right side. And they're just gonna go in top 4, 5, 4, 5 of letters, just so you know what I'm referencing. Just hammer them right onto that little piece right there, those little square pegs. You're gonna wanna keep this piece out, but generally this piece would just plop in right there, like so. We're gonna keep him out of there for now. By this point, the wood glue is already drying that I can use it, but if you have a wood glue that isn't the best or it isn't seeming to hold, give it a good 24 hours before you really start operating with this key. So you may want to glue this right away and come back after a while if this keeps popping off on you, just so you're aware. But my wood glue dries usually in about 30 minutes to an hour, and by the time I'm already done assembling other stuff, it's already been half an hour to an hour for it to dry. Page 1 should be generally complete for the stage 1 process of the assembly. The stage 2 or the lockup process is where we would attach the hinges and the inserts and then insert all of the various little, toggle pieces that would actually make this a functioning lockable puzzle. So for right now, we're going to set this off to the side and move on to the next.